So play is the highest form of human expression. It's how we reach our full potential. It's how we realise our gifts to the world. And so if we can help young children do that, who knows what they'll be able to achieve.
Hi, Lou. I'm absolutely thrilled to have you as part of our Early Childhood Conference this year as our international speaker. Thank you so much for being here with us. I know you from your YouTube channel, For a School Lou, which is phenomenal. But please introduce yourself to our audience and let us know what you do on a day-to-day basis.
Firstly, thank you for inviting me to come and have this conversation. It's great that there are people like yourself opening up space for these conversations and recognising the importance of getting children outside. So a little bit about me. For the last 18 years, I've been for a school leader, which makes me feel a bit old. And for 15 of those years, I've also been a trainer. So I help other people become forest school leaders and get children outside, usually into a natural space on a regular basis. And then over the last couple of years, well, lots of things happened. One thing, lockdown happened, of course, which stopped face-to-face training happening. And then I also had a little girl. And so during that time, I thought, oh, what could I do that would still kind of put me in touch with other people and doing outdoor things and helping for a school? And so I decided to experiment a little bit with making YouTube videos. And it literally started as an experiment and just put some bits and pieces out there. And and over the last couple of years, it's sort of slowly grown, and I'm just amazed at how it's connected me with people like yourselves across the planet. Really,
yes.
I mean, think about
that. when I first stumbled upon your YouTube channel For a School Lou, I was looking for some inspiration on setting up a campfire for. We were doing an event in our school, and I just wanted to share some tricks with the teachers. And the moment I stumbled upon it, I was just amazed. It doesn't look like it's been out there for just a short period of time. It looks like you have so much experience in doing this kind of work. But it definitely reached us all the way in Brunei, and it's amazing. It's amazing how far. So you are based in the UK. It's very different, I would assume. I've never been to the UK myself, but I'm currently in Romania, and I think we enjoy similar weather. But in Brunei, it's very hot and warm throughout the year. We don't have seasons. And so being outdoors is great. We have that constant weather, and it's quite amazing. And yes, we would like to see a lot more people going outdoors now after the COVID. How often do you go outdoors now that you're probably very busy with the YouTube channel and with your little one?
So I try to make sure we go outside every day with Lily Rowe. And sometimes that might be just out in the garden, and Lily Rowe's got a little mud kitchen in the garden and other bits and pieces, to explore. But then at least 3 or 4 times a week, we might go further afield. We're very fortunate where we live here in the Norfolk part of the UK. That's on the east side of the UK. It's quite rural. So where we live, we can go for walks around the village, and very quickly we're into countryside. And there's some nice woodland. And we also live very near the coast as well. So we can walk to the sea as well on a regular basis. And we do go to our own forest school sessions as participants once a week as well, which is nice.
Would you like to tell us a little bit more about forest school? Because to tell you the truth, we don't have that in Brunei. I've never heard it myself. I do have a colleague of mine who will be featured in our early childhood conference this year, who tries to take families in the jungle for jungle walks. I never heard of forest school. So tell us a little bit about what forest school is and what you do at forest school.
Originally it's a way of working with people that's been inspired from Scandinavian practice. And in the UK, it's started up in the early 1990s after some early years practitioners visited particularly Denmark, and they saw early years practice in Denmark and how much time that the young children spent outside, and they saw how confident they were and how independent they were, and they kind of attributed that to the amount of time they were spending out in nature. And so they brought back those sort of bits of inspiration, and they created like a British version, if you like, of what they saw. It's not exactly the same as Scandinavian practice, because it has to obviously fit in with the culture that it's working within. And so UK Forest School is about regular and repeated contact with a natural space. So typically the same group of children, or it's actually not just for children as well, it can work with older people and adults, will go to the same natural space on a repeated basis, usually at least once a week, but there are early years settings that will be out every day as well. And it's very much learner-centered and play-based as well. So it's about supporting the children to be able to freely choose what they would like to do and sort of cultivate their curiosity and support them appropriately to be able to explore and discover and interact with the environment and of course each other as well, developing those social skills, those emotional skills. And sort of research around it suggests that it is particularly good for that sort of emotional, social development, and particularly things like resilience and self-esteem and confidence building. So it's all about connection, really, connection with nature, connection with each other, connection with ourselves. I bet it's amazing in Brunei with jungles as well. That would be phenomenal in terms of the wildlife that you could find out there.
Well, yes, we take children. I mean, we run a school outdoors, so we are with the children outdoors every day. But it's a slightly modified environment. It's not pure nature, but we do go with children out and about at least once a month. And our colleague, as I mentioned, and he will be featured as well, and he'll have a video and talk more about what he does, takes families in the jungle on, you have to go on certain paths. You can't just venture in the jungle. It's very compact. The jungles are very compact compared to the forest that we have here in Romania. I'm sure in the UK is the same. You can easily just walk into a forest. Even though you don't know your way. It's not quite like that in the jungle, but it is amazing. It's mind-blowing for adults, and I think there is an impact on children as well, to connect with nature. You mentioned so many benefits of being outdoors, and you've actually said to us that you would like to live in a world where people are connected with nature, and you actually mentioned quite a lot of benefits. Is there anyone in particular that you think is highly beneficial for children to be outdoors?
I would say that we are designed to be outside. So it's our natural habitat, if you like, and certainly in childhood, it's a child's natural habitat. Evolutionarily speaking, we've spent hundreds of thousands of years as a creature being out in the woods, in the forests, and it's only very recently in our evolution in the last 100 years or so that we've come indoors for the majority of our time. And I believe that that's one of the reasons that we are, I guess, living in a society where there are lots of different challenges, lots of different physical illnesses, mental health difficulties, things like attention deficit disorders and other sort of learning needs. And I believe that coming indoors and being more sedentary as well, and more controlled, I suppose, as well. I believe, certainly here in the UK, children's lives get very organised. You know, they get sent to club after club, and then they're in school and they have after school club, they go to dance lessons, music lessons, and they don't really have any free time to play and to be and to choose how to spend their time. And I think childhood should be about play, that free time in nature, because that's how our ancestors would have spent their time, and our physical health and mental health and spiritual health depend upon it. And when we kind of get disconnected from that, we get ill, we get poorly. So I see being outside in nature, and particularly playing in nature, as a very healing experience, and I believe it could help in a multitude of different ways, from tiny babies all the way through to adults. I've observed people of all ages literally relax when you bring them to the woods, and they kind of relax and they feel calm, and the stresses of sort of busy lives can disappear, and it can be magical to watch.
I totally agree with you. Even here in where we live, children have a very busy day every day. It's school, and then there might be tuition, there may be clubs. It's an ongoing schedule. And yes, I totally agree with what you said, that we should be outdoors a lot more. I'll bring back your YouTube channel, because I'd like people to go there and see the wealth of information that you have recorded over time and continue to do so so frequently. You have lots of videos that will inspire educators, parents, anyone really that has children or enjoys working with children. I particularly like one recording that you've put about eating dirt. But then there are others that I particularly take inspiration from, such as building fire or avoiding praise. I see risk in all of these videos embedded in them, and risk for everyone, for young ones and for adults. Perhaps we can touch on risk and what it means for children to be exposed to risk, and even adults.
Firstly, we think about risk in terms of physical risks, you know, physically hurting ourselves, but certainly within Forest School, we think about risk in a broader sense as well. So thinking about risk in terms of emotional risks, like trusting someone, or social risks. So within Forest School, risk is actually one of the 6 principles of Forest School, about helping people take appropriate risks. And we mean that in a holistic sense. And it's I guess it's the phrase appropriate risk that is the key thing, which all boils down to a value judgment that we might have as practitioners or parents about what is the right amount of risk to expose a child to. And there are huge benefits to risk taking. So we don't want to wrap children up in cotton wool, because that is actually quite harmful to them. Because ultimately, you know, life is a risky thing. To be out there, to live in this world, there are risks all around.
And very unpredictable as well, isn't it?
Absolutely. And particularly sort of the way both the environment and society is going, it's even more unpredictable about what sort of future the children of today are going to grow up into. And if we deny them the opportunity to learn about risk in childhood by trying to overly protect them, then we're doing them a disservice, because we won't be equipping them for when they're older, and then being able to make decisions about how to manage risk in their life as they grow up. And there is actually sort of research about, if you overly protect children in young childhood, they can't make appropriate decisions when they get older, and that actually might leave them exposed to greater harm. So, you you know, as parents, obviously I understand, you know, you want to protect your child. That's a natural inherent parenting instinct. I guess it's about balance. Of course, we don't want to expose children to, you know, serious possible harm, life-changing injuries or anything like that. So you've got that on one end, but then on the other end, you don't want to protect them from absolutely everything so that they don't learn about risk. So this whole thing about appropriate risk is like a seesaw, and you've got to kind of find the right balance point. And the thing with that is it's going to depend on the individual child, and also about your own kind of comfort levels as well, because sometimes our anxiety as parents or practitioners can actually kind of ripple out of us and cause anxiety in the children as well. So you've got to find, I guess, a sweet spot for the child and for yourself, and kind of work out where that is. Because, you know, for one person it might be far too much risk, but for another person it might be too easy and they need a bigger risk. So it's about judging that based on where people are at.
I wonder, I mean, I see, as you say things, I try to draw things that would match what we have in Brunei, being a very sunny environment where we live. A lot of parents will feel that it's risky to be outdoors because it's too sunny or it's too hot. I particularly, as a parent, I don't see that because I could just put a hat on. But as you say, everybody has a different understanding of risk. Are there any ways in which parents could loosen up a bit and perhaps allow risk in their children's life? Is there something that they need to understand themselves, perhaps?
I suppose some of it might also be linked to us as parents, our own childhood experiences as
Absolutely.
well. And I think there has been a slow reduction in childhood play experiences over the years. So if you as a parent didn't have lots of outdoor play experiences yourself as a child, you know, you might not be familiar with the benefits of those things. So I guess kind of learning more about how playing with dirt or climbing trees, you know, benefits your child and helps them with their holistic development would be a good place to start. I would also say that there are literally risks in anything, any choice we make, there are risks involved. So, for example, there are risks associated with choosing an indoor sedentary lifestyle, you know, playing on a computer, for example, as an alternative to going out in the garden. Those risks might not be so immediate or so obvious, but that they're still there. For example, we know that, you know, long-term sedentary lifestyles lead to things like obesity and diabetes and mental health disorders. And because they're not, you know, it's not the same as falling out a tree and breaking your arm. That's very immediate to see the possible harm, whereas these are more slow, chronic kind of illnesses that may be formed. But you are, you know, the more time you spend sat down in front of a screen indoors, that increases the risk factors associated with those lifelong things. Not wanting to scare people, but just making, I think, as practitioners and parents, we need to be aware that there is risk within any decision that we make.
Absolutely.
And it's just some take longer to show themselves than others.
Yes. You have in one of your videos with regards to risk, you discuss misconceptions about risk. Please touch on some of the misconceptions that you've researched.
Here in the UK, we have sort of a government department called the Health and Safety Executive that is, I guess, responsible for overseeing health and safety in all workplaces, and that includes schools and forest schools and things like that. And they were so fed up that in the press and in the media, there used to be sort of like Chinese rumours about things that you can't do, that, you know, that schools can't do. And there were various misconceptions like you can't play snowball fights, you know, in the school ground. Not that perhaps in Brunei you would play
No, we won't be playing ever. No.
But things like you can't play conkers, which you know, conkers are like a seed from
Yes.
from a tree that you hang on a
Yes.
string, and you have to wear goggles to play conkers. Or like in the craft area, there was a you know, like often you might use egg boxes or toilet rolls to make things in your craft area, and there was a rumor that you can't use those at all. And in the media, in the newspapers and stuff, it was said that this is what health and safety say, and actually that wasn't true. The government Department for Health and Safety had never said those things, because they try to promote a common sense risk management system where you look at the benefits and then you weigh up the risks. That seesaw that we were talking about earlier, and that's what the government recommends. And they also have quoted, you know, that you don't want to wrap children in cotton wool, that you want to promote healthy risk taking. And so yeah, they actually put on their websites these cartoons to dispel these myths, so that teachers and educators sort of would understand. And so these misconceptions kind of have stemmed somewhere along the lines where somebody like a head teacher or a manager somewhere has kind of perhaps misunderstood the guidance that's coming from government and kind of implemented what you would call a control action, like wearing goggles would be a control action when you're playing conkers, that is perhaps just it's over the top. It's kind of too much. It's not proportionate to the amount of risk. And so certainly in the UK law about health and safety, it's all about proportionate responses to risk. But just on that topic, I think adults can only make proportionate judgments about how to control or manage risk if they've had experience of it. And so going back to maybe some parents, some practitioners didn't play outdoors as children, then perhaps they need to have some time to play themselves outside or have more experience of being outside, so that they're then better able to make value judgments about what level of risk they expose their children to, which I guess is where, if there are any sort of outdoor programs for parents and children to come together. Certainly in the UK here, we have like forest school programs where parents can come with their children, so that they, you know, if they aren't experienced of being outdoors, that's done in a guided way. That can be really useful and help parents sort of loosen up, as you say, about kind of taking risks.
It's very interesting. Here in Brunei, where I live, I seldom see events happening. I think there's a lot more work to be done. I guess obviously we're not criticizing. It's just so that there's plenty of room to work with families and get outdoors with them, with children, and promote being outdoors and learning outdoors. We know with young children, one of the risks is for them putting things in the mouth, and you have such an amazing video on eating dirt. Do you see that as a risk? A lot of parents will be concerned about, my child is going outdoors, and if they're playing with, you know, if they're going in the grass or they're going in the sand, they're going to put lots of things in the mouth, and I might as well, you know, not do that or not offer that.
So again, it comes down to that seesaw thing about the benefits versus the risk. So that video that you're mentioning was sort of specifically about my daughter and sort of lessons I've been learning from her as she's, you know, developing. And that was when she was quite young, because obviously babies explore the world through putting things in their mouths. And it hadn't really occurred to me, this might sound a bit funny, because I have become a parent quite sort of later, I suppose, in life. It hadn't occurred to me like the level of anxiety that parents might have about young children being outside, because I feel very comfortable myself outside. And we were going to like baby groups out in the forest, and some parents were very hypervigilant about, you know, the baby's not putting things in their mouths, which is kind of what spurred me to make that video, because I would always kind of watch what Lily Rowe was putting in her mouth, but because I was familiar with the environment, because I recognize, for example, all the plant species out there, if she put a leaf in her mouth, I know majority of those kind of woodland species, so I would know whether or not it was poisonous. So if it was, and some of them of course are edible species out there, so if it was an edible species, I would let her explore it with her mouth. And also in terms of kind of dirt and soil, there is lots of research out there about how there's bacteria in soil that's incredibly good for us and good for our kind of gut biome bacteria. And they've even linked some of the bacteria in soil to sort of like antidepressant kind of type effects on the body as well. So, on one side of the seesaw, there are these benefits to exploring soil and putting things in your mouth, and certainly in infancy the mouth is the main kind of sensory input that they explore the world through. Then of course there are risks on the other side of the seesaw, which it is important to acknowledge that there could be poisonous species out there that the baby might put in their mouths. I suppose there could be choking hazards as well, and there could be things like animal feces or something in the soil as well, which is perhaps, in my mind, those are the things particularly to watch for. So as a parent, I suppose I'm going through this risk assessment process in my mind, and I've got kind of like control actions as well. So one of them being like, I know the species, for example, would be a control action. If I didn't know what the species was, I probably would remove it from her mouth in case it was toxic. In terms of like choking, I have done first aid training, so kind of I would know hopefully what to do should that arise. And then in terms of kind of feces, I suppose it's kind of, you do a bit of a safety check before you pop your baby down on the ground to check what's around. So even as a parent, I'm doing like a risk assessment in my mind, like I would do if I was running forest school with groups of children. And so for me, the benefits of Lily exploring those things with her mouth and the happy bacteria that she might be gaining outweighed the risks in my mind with those control actions that I put in place. So it's not, again, one of the misconceptions, or it's not really a misconception, but what I've noticed sometimes is because people feel very constrained about health and safety, you can sometimes have like the complete opposite, where people are just like, yeah, whatever, carry on, without any sort of thought process around it, which then could of course potentially lead to harm. So I guess what we're aiming for is somewhere in the middle, that there is a thought process behind balancing these risks against the benefits, rather than just going, yeah, kids, just do whatever you want. There is a process behind it.
Absolutely. And that balance is very important for parents, but also obviously we're representing a school, and I think, and you mention it very often in your videos about that risk assessment of the environment before children go somewhere. So it's for you, it's finding that balance within the forest of what is potentially harmful and what you feel that is safe and should have an amount of risk. So I think you yourself in your practice are looking for that balance, isn't it? And I guess the schools as well can look for that balance within their own environment. And I think it's important for parents to know that educators and professionals within the forest school and schools are looking for that, are doing that risk assessment. And it's not like you say, yes, you come to school and you do whatever you want. Don't worry if you climb that branch, but that branch doesn't look fit enough to carry you, that kind of environment. I think it's very important to stress that risk assessments are happening at forest school. I listened to your videos about assessing the environment in terms of risk. And we too do it in schools. And I think parents, as you said, can find that balance within their own environment. I did have a photo to share with the group, and I mentioned about it, and I'm going to do it now because you're talking about what's appropriate, and I mean finding that balance. So let me share that. Can you see that? Yeah, that's Aisha Ilinka, and she's just on the ground. We were in the garden clearing the potato beds. This is actually a potato bed that she's sitting on, but it's been cleared. And we were at a fair distance, I would say a meter and a half away, maybe 2. And she's had this time playing with the soil. You can see a pile of weeds right behind her. And you can see her mouth is not very clean. That's because of the dirt that she's been testing. I did feel like it was a safe environment for her. There were no more weeds or, plants with spikes. And the land is very clean, I would say. We don't spray the land with any insecticides or anything. It's quite organic in the way the potatoes are grown here. And she's had such an amazing time. You can see her clothes are just, she was covering herself with soil. She removed the shoes herself, and I think she was just feeling the chillness of the ground. It was pretty chilly that day, but she's really, really happy, and that made me stop going around her and checking on her whether she was okay. So this is the kind of risk assessment that I've done as a parent. I left her be there on her own for maybe 10 minutes, and she was exploring the soil, really, really enjoying the feel of it, and probably tasted good. She was happy throughout the experience, and wasn't very happy about being removed. Eventually, she came up herself and has gone into a different position. She's found the potato. Here she is after she stood up by herself. She's found a little potato. As we were pulling the weeds from the potato bed, some of the potatoes were removed together with the weeds, and she's found one and was experimenting on it, poking her fingers into its skin. So very, very interesting experience for her. She's never done that before. And so I was very, very happy. I was very happy with myself for allowing that to happen. I didn't think anything was risky there. Even biting through the potato, I didn't think that was risky, but that was me as a parent. That was my decision, obviously, to allow that to happen. I just feel like she's had so much sensory input through that experience. I was really, really happy with myself for allowing that.
Huge benefits to her development there, like you said, the sensory development, the physical development, maybe the gut bacteria development from experiencing the soil, giving her freedom, without directing her. She's been able to make her own choices about how to interact with that environment. So yeah, huge benefits there. And I think also this is an interesting point that you said, you sort of left her sat there at a sort of short distance away from you. But young children they're very good at like telling you if they're not happy about something as well. And I think sometimes as parents and practitioners, we can underestimate young children's capabilities, particularly if they can't yet talk fully and verbalize things. But actually, just because they can't talk doesn't mean they can't communicate.
Oh, absolutely.
And they fairly sensible in many ways. That if they're not happy with something, if they find something, scratch themselves on a thorny plant, they'll let you know, won't you? I think sometimes we need to give younger children more credit, I suppose, for what they're capable of independently. That, I guess, also from that point of view, like we talked about balancing risk and the appropriate level of risk in terms of play and being able to make choices. It's a similar kind of process about weighing up where is that particular child at in terms of their ability levels and their ability to choose and self-direct, or whether they need a bit more help. And what I've noticed is actually very young children are far well, they're thought they naturally play just as an inherent drive, as part of them. And it's actually older children that can struggle more with play. And I think that's because, you know, over time they've sort of been so used to being kind of told what to do by adults that they sort of almost lose that natural drive. But very young children still have that in them, and as adults we've just got to kind of get out the way really for them to kind of get on with their play. But older children might need a bit more help to play.
Absolutely. I'd like to bring back what you said, that you know, allowing children without being very close to them to express themselves, they actually learn to communicate. It's I mean, Aisha Ilinka, she's just 1 year and 4 months, and you're right. If there was something that she was unhappy or she was struggling with, or she would have found a way to let us know, and she would have just cried or called. She's actually learning to communicate. She's actually making her own sounds, calling our attention to come to even help her stand up, or she will show us things. Like in this particular experience, she hasn't informed us of anything. She was just very happy exploring. But yeah, I think moving just a little away and observing the child. We were with our eyes on her. It was myself and my mom and my aunt, and we were all looking at her from time to time to see whether she's okay, because she wasn't calling. She wasn't in despair for anything. And we were quite mesmerized. My parents have not met her yet. This is the first time they're meeting her, and they're like very impressed with her ability to know a lot of things at this age. And I think it's also because we've let her explore things and do things on her own with minimal supervision, obviously, but allow her that risk to touch the ground, to walk barefoot or in socks. We're not worried about clothes getting dirty. This is not a risk. Obviously, that's very, very important. They learn to communicate with us as well. So the language development, her senses are all developing. It's quite amazing. And yes, we've seen experiences when children would come to us, and being in a very traditional classroom-based environment, and then they were all hit with this outdoor space where you can choose what to do during the school time. You can choose where to go, whether you want to go to the sand pit or the mud kitchen, or you want to go to the woodwork area, and they wouldn't know whether they were allowed. They were asking for approval. And I found it quite sad to see that the children have to ask for approval to do things.
We see similar things like that in the UK as well, as you go up the age groups in the school system. So this is why I think play is so important. Okay, play, I think, is one of the most important things we can do as human beings. In fact, I think the German educator Friedrich Froebel 200 years ago said something about play. Let's see if I can remember the quote. He said, "Play is the highest form of human expression in childhood."
Exactly. Yes, correct.
It alone is the expression of what's in a child's soul, he said. And I would agree with him. I think when we're playing, we're expressing our true nature, our authentic selves. And unfortunately, in sort of the busyness of the modern day world and the education system, and just generally the busyness of life, we are kind of taken away from ourselves because of certain obligations and things that we have to do in life. And again, I think, you know, we talked earlier about living indoors being partly the reason behind some of these health issues in our society. I would say also the lack of play would also be another factor here, because, you know, if we're busy doing this and that and other things to please other people, then that might affect our mental well-being. And one of the features of like play, in terms of like defining what play is that, well, play has to be freely chosen, personally directed, and intrinsically motivated. And that third one, intrinsically motivated, means that play, that behavior of play, is coming from within you, and the drive to continue it is just you're just doing it for you. You're not being externally bribed or coerced or rewarded to do whatever it is that you're doing in your play. And so I think also by that definition, like, we can broaden our sort of thoughts around what play actually looks like, because play can look differently for different people.
Absolutely.
And like what one person finds as play, another person might not. That might be a chore to them because that's not really their thing. So it's about recognizing that play really is unique to each individual, about what kind of drives us, what gets us excited, what gets us immersed, and we like lose ourselves in the flow of it. That's what is play to us. And again, the outdoor environment, I've noticed, is very conducive to helping people get to that state of immersing themselves. And I think it's because nature is unique and diverse, and it's full of loose parts. There's sticks and leaves and seeds and animal tracks and mud and water, and there's all these things, and then it might start raining, and it's a constantly changing environment. It's not like indoors, the classroom, where you have to change the displays all the time. It's always changing out there. In fact, I'm quite lazy as a practitioner, so it's great. I can go out there. There's always something different out there every single day, without me having to, prepare resources. Environment of the outdoors facilitates curiosity and discovery, because it's changing, and because there's things that you can collect and move and connect, and it's an inspiring place to be for children and adults to be able to get to that state of play.
Lou, tell us about how being outdoors, risk, opportunities, and play helps children benefit in their lifelong learning.
So I would say, being outside, you can cover pretty much 99% of the curriculum that you would do indoors. Outdoors, you can do outdoors. So I am actually a qualified teacher as well. I have taught in a mainstream primary school in the UK, and I set up a forest school as part of that primary school. We were inside in a normal classroom environment for some of the time, but then we were also outside a lot of the time. So we would go out for forest school, but we would also take lessons outside as well. And we also had like a garden area where we were growing things. What I noticed was, actually, in forest school and in the play-based outdoor parts of what we did, the children were naturally exhibiting some of the things that me as a practitioner were kind of looking for in terms of the curriculum, and to be able to tick them off. So for example, the children were collecting sticks, and then they decided to work out who had the longest stick, and so they started lining them all up and comparing them. And of course, that's part of the maths curriculum in terms of being able to measure things. And then they were estimating things, and then even at one point, some of them started writing numerals and doing sums with sticks, and I didn't tell them to. In fact, if I had told them to, perhaps that would have put them off. But actually, because it was coming from them, and it was coming from their inherent motivation to learn and natural curiosity, they were really, really motivated. They really wanted to learn about measurement of sticks in this case. And of course, that is what you want in terms of lifelong learning. You want to draw people's natural curiosity, so that there's a continuation desire to discover more about the world. In fact, as I understand it, the word education means to draw out, not to put in.
Correctly.
And yeah, I mean, here in the UK, our mainstream education system is still a bit Victorian in that sense, where you know, they consider children as empty vessels to be filled with knowledge, where actually the word education means to draw out, as in draw out that curiosity, draw out that natural inclination to want to learn about the world. All humans have that. Well, they all have it in the beginning, in like when they're very young. You know, watch a toddler like your daughter, watch her curiosity to discover the world around her, to experiment, to try and connect things together, to move her body. That's all naturally inherent within every single young child. I would argue that certainly here in the UK, our mainstream education actually puts children off learning because things are forced, because they're sometimes told you've got to sit down and be still at your desks and, you know, do this maths worksheet, when actually that's not what they want to do. You know, why do that? Why measure some lines on a bit of paper when you've got a load of sticks outside that you can kind of play with and experiment with, and it has more meaning as well for the children because they're doing it for their purposes, if it's part of their play.
And I think it will stay in their mind a lot more as a memory and use it later for their life. Absolutely.
And, you know, it's interesting that Forest School, like I mentioned earlier, it has come from Scandinavian early years practice. Now, as I understand it, in Scandinavia, they have a longer period of time in their early years provision. So they don't start formal school till they're around 7 years old, which is great, you know, to have that real strong foundation of child-centered time to learn. And I believe there is research out there that has like compared like the tests that, you know, they score children usually at age 7 and then again at age 10, 11 here in the UK they do. So they compared the scores of the standardized tests in Britain to the Scandinavian children, and actually the Scandinavian children score higher on those tests because they have had this foundation of play-based, learner-centered learning, where they've built their emotional skills, their social skills, they've developed a curiosity, a love for learning, a drive for learning and motivation to learn. And so then when they do go into school and perhaps have to do more formal type education, they've got that desire to learn and to find out about the world, and they also, you know, can connect with each other because they've got good social skills, so they can communicate and they can work together, and they've also got strong resilience and independence skills as well. So that sets them up to then learn the more academic subjects, and so they make progress much more quickly. Compared to here in the UK, children start formal school really when they're 5, and you know, sometimes they're not ready for it. And you know, they can be put off learning quite early on in their education, which is so sad. Because, you know, as teachers, as practitioners, surely no one goes into teaching wanting to put children off learning. You know, as a teacher, that's terrible. But you know, the system can sometimes mean that teachers perhaps are not doing things in the way that they would wish to. But I believe, you know, in terms of Forest School and other people promoting outdoor and play-based learning, is we're providing an alternative and showing parents, showing other practitioners, showing the powers that be that there are other ways of being, and that work with the children's natural disposition to learn and to be curious. And actually, if we trust the children, it's fundamentally about trust, to trust the children to be able to direct their own learning and development, and us as a practitioner be there as a guide and a supportive, well, in sort of child development they call it as a scaffold. Vygotsky will talk about scaffolding. We can be there as a scaffold, not as a director. so that we can kind of support them appropriately, observe where they're at, help plan for their next steps, and they'll do it themselves.
I think if adults will draw from what the need is in terms of equipped individuals, we don't really need everyone to be highly academic. We need those highly academic people to still be social, to still love nature, take care of the earth, appreciate what nature brings. I think we will all be more mindful of what children do when they're young, and what they do in schools and what they do outside school in their free time. See, I'm using the word free time as is a dedicated time to be free, when school should allow freedom within themselves for children to be who they really want to be, children.
And we spoke earlier about how there is an unpredictability about the future and about the world that children of today might be living in as adults. And actually, creativity is something that we should be promoting actively, because who knows what the jobs of the future will be? Who knows what skill sets or abilities the adults of the future will need to be able to kind of thrive in the future. And so actually having the skills of creativity and being able to think openly and be able to sort of problem solve and adapt, and all of those sort of aspects of kind of creative processes would be highly valuable, I think, to try and nurture within children. And again, I would say that play is, by its very nature, a creative process, because you have to make your own choices in play, you have to make your own decisions in play, you have to experiment and try stuff out, and there might be failures in your play that you have to kind of cope with and adapt and try again and correct. And mastery comes through play. And an example I sometimes give when I'm doing forest school training, just to highlight how important play is Albert Einstein, which this might seem like a big leap from early years children playing, but just bear with me. So I believe when Albert Einstein created his theory of E equals mc squared, he was playing, right? Because he was freely choosing, he was personally directing, and he was intrinsically motivating. Because at the time, apparently, he wasn't working as a scientist, he was working as a clerk in a patent office. So nobody told him, you know, Albert, you're going to work on this theory. Nobody told it.
You have to have this done by the end of the day. Yeah.
Exactly. You know, he wanted to do it. He chose to do it. He was personally directing because, well, it's groundbreaking physics. Nobody had kind of done this before. I'm sure he probably did draw inspiration from other scientists and things, and then intrinsically motivated. Well, he wasn't famous at the time, he wasn't being paid to do it, he had no external rewards, and as I understand it, it took about 4 years for any other scientist to pay attention to his theory. So, you know, he didn't have any recognition for 4 years about it. So, you know, he was doing it because that was what he did, that's what his drive was. And he created a piece of physics that completely changed our understanding of the universe. And he was playing when he was doing that. And like, could you imagine if someone said, hey, Albert, stop playing around, you know, get on with your work. Come on, sit down at your desk and file those things, you know, come and do that. We live in a completely different world.
Absolutely.
So play is the highest form of human expression. It's how we reach our full potential. It's how we realize our gifts to the world. And so if we can help young children do that, who knows what they'll be able to achieve as they grow into adults, and who knows what change they will make in the world and in the future. So we need to get playing outdoors.
We need to get playing, and we need to allow play. We need to allow play. We need to allow children to play freely, as you say, to be intrinsically motivated without play that we think it's right for the children, isn't it? That prepared play by adults. It should not happen that way. It should just be purely chosen by them, and they should spend as long as they want playing, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think a lot of the barriers to play can be time. Yeah, time. They need time to immerse themselves. I've heard some parents, say they're worried that their child will get bored. Well, actually, being bored might actually have some benefits.
Oh, absolutely.
Because we live in such busy lives, and we're always, being organized, and this is happening. Well, actually having a bit of space and time just to kind of think, well, okay, what do I want to do? What can I do? Can actually be really useful for a child to experience, and to then learn that they can do something about it. They can take action in the world to remedy their boredom if they feel bored. It gives them a self of they're able to meet their own needs.
Well, boredom is definitely not a risk, isn't it? It just makes your brain work, makes your brain think about what options do I get now that I don't know what to do. Makes you think, isn't it? Makes you take decision. Lovely chat, Louise. I'm so happy to again have you in this recording. We hope to do more in the future. We'll definitely keep watching your YouTube channel, Forest School Lou. Everyone who's listening, please have a look. Amazing inspiration for me as an educator and as a parent. So you cover everything that I possibly need as a parent, as an educator. Thank you so much for doing what you're doing, and thank you so much for sitting down with me today. Do you have a little poem for us today? Because you do end your videos on YouTube with a poem. Did you have the time?
I have made you it's a slightly dodgy poem because I did it in a couple of minutes before talking to you, but I thought I would do one, so I might have to read it off a bit of paper.
No problem. Go ahead.
Here we go. Exploring outdoors is a wonderful thing. Who knows what adventures it'll bring? Help your child cultivate curiosity by taking some risks and heading to the trees.
Thank you so much, Louise.
Thank you. It's been lovely to talk to you.